Each week we talk to interesting people from across the HLA community to share with us their ideas and their innovations and hopefully bring them to a global audience. Many of the topics come from our community, with scholars and faculty expressing an interest in many of the discussions that we're about to have. HLA programs are built on 6 pillars. The leader is an innovator and entrepreneur, the leader is a communicator, the leader is a manager, the leader as a negotiator, the leader as a follower, and the leader as a philosopher. If you are interested in becoming a HLA scholar, why not get in contact? Many of the episodes in HLA Live will cover one or more of these important pillars. The HLA team consists of Pedra, Eamon, Tim, Riddy, Alistair, Adil, and Trisha, and a range of other HLA scholars and faculty.
Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Emma Cox. I'm delighted to be chairing this panel on innovation in medical education. And we are very lucky to be joined by a panel of experts who bring a wide spectrum of insight and experience. So before I introduce the panel properly, I'll give a brief context on MedEd innovation. To innovate is often defined as to make changes in something established. In 2013, the Council of Deans called for greater innovation in medical education. They said that innovation is generally overlooked as a focus for research or policy. And they highlighted how innovation is necessary to address the financial pressures within learning institutions. Also, students are increasingly seen as consumers rather than just passive participants in their education. And educators need to innovate to entice students to buy into their products. Since 2013, medical education has come a long way. We've seen that today. We have simulations, virtual reality, 3D modelling, just to name a few. COVID-19 means that social distancing and remote learning are here to stay. And so the need for innovation is now greater than ever before. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm actually going to introduce the panel. So we've got Dr. Johnny Guckian, who you met earlier. He's the medical education founder of MediSense and director for social media and communications for ASME. We've also got Dr. Andrew Nanapragasam, founder of Radiology Nation, and also an NHS England clinical entrepreneur. We've got Dr. Junaid Fakuta, co-founder of MedRevision Limited, and Ryan Devlin, who you also met earlier, co-chair of Jasmine. And I'm Emma Cox, a member of the Jasmine committee and the Chief Product Officer at Medics Academy. I'm now going to ask each of the panel to tell us a bit more about themselves and how they have innovated in the field of medical education. Johnny, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I set up MediSense when I was in F1. Basically what happened was I used to run Newcastle Uni's Medical Education Society. And then I graduated and moved into foundation in a little DGH, and I felt a bit lost. There was no med ed community around me. And so I just felt I needed this outlet for creativity. And my F2 happened to be a tech genius, which is always really handy to have. So Tom and I, with a couple of other mates, set up MediSense, which has really been a fantastic experience. Don't really know anything about business. Well, didn't at the start, and didn't intend to know anything about it. And I just find getting involved in innovation opens doors and leads to more opportunities. And through that, I got involved with TASME and then the board of directors of ASME, and it's been a whirlwind and lots of fun.
Brilliant. Andy?
Hi everyone, thanks for having me today. My name's Andrew Nanapragasam. I'm a radiology registrar and I'm working in London. I set up an organization called Radiology Nation early on in my training, and it was inspired by having been the beneficiary of many extraordinary teachers during my formative years in medical school and junior doctor training, that I thought I needed to somehow pay this forward to the next generation. And having also got an interest in technology, website design, social media, I thought I can just bring that together, and especially bringing that together for radiologists, it's really actually quite suited radiology, quite well suited to technology, because so much of it is image based, and you can deliver a lot of the content online. And so well before the virus, maybe about a year or year and a half ago, we started making YouTube videos and putting out content on the various social media platforms.
Perfect. Junaid?
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks so much for inviting us to be here today. I've always been interested in medical education throughout my whole medical career, and it's been from very traditional didactic lecturing at the start, and it's kind of progressed. And what we've started to see is technology has enhanced things so much, but it often takes a bit of time for it to filter through downwards. So initially we started using social networks, so things like WhatsApp messaging, to try and set up medical revision courses, to try and increase that interactivity. And that to me is one of the key things and key innovations that technology allows, is that interactivity between the learner and the teacher. Most recently, what we've started to develop are virtual patient simulations. So the simulation training, we think, is fantastic. It allows so much to be taught and so much to learn from it. But we want to see if that can be moved into the digital age. So we've now developed these virtual patient simulations, which allows the learners to make real life decisions for the patients that are in front of them, to try and simulate that experience of actually seeing these patients. So that's been trialled on the FDocs program, and with good success. And we're hopefully going to bring that forwards.
Oh, brilliant. And Ryan?
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm the co-chair of Jasmine, and Jasmine has been helping to innovate with MedEd by having a network of students and foundation year doctors around the UK, helping to teach teachers essentially in medical education. And we've been doing that through various prizes and events. For example, we've got the Student and Foundation Innovation Prize, which allows medical students and foundation year doctors to share their innovations throughout the country, and to encourage them to advance medical education further. One of the big innovations I've seen has really been less of MedEd, but more personal one, in that I've seen more students getting involved in MedEd from earlier years, when originally they'd start getting involved from clinical years onwards. We're now starting to see first years, second years getting involved with teaching and being really engaged by it.
That's, I think, also something that we've noticed at Medics Academy, is a real demand from very early in people's careers to actually get involved in medical education. So I guess just to start things off, what effect do you guys think that COVID-19 has had on particularly innovation in medical education?
Shall I go first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been good. So I'll apply to social media because that's my baby. Yeah, I think it's been a stimulant for innovation, because obviously we've got this vacuum now of time and of opportunity, and there's a load of, I think there's been recently a phenomenon of what is a generation of creative workers and thinkers within the medical community. So medical students are so talented now, and they are directing that talent towards medical education. And so that has really filled that vacuum. And so I think things have changed, and that may well be a sustainable change as well.
Does anyone else want to comment on that?
You've got a kind of an interesting situation, because you've had all these organizations like Zoom, Microsoft Teams. These all pre-existed the virus. And what's interesting is that it just, the main thing the virus did is it just made people engage better with pre-existing technologies. I think Pedro referred to this earlier. Nothing that's happening with, for example, this meeting is anything that's new. Nothing about this meeting is anything that couldn't have happened a year ago. But what we're seeing is we're just seeing some innovation driven by necessity. And I think that's kind of a mantra that we could kind of apply to all aspects of our lives. And we can apply that even after the virus is gone, being proactive about trying to use innovative technologies and seeing actually they're not actually that scary. And actually they can be quite good.
Yeah, I think that's at the heart of it. A lot of this innovation is actually taking an innovation that was there 10 years ago in a different field, but us in healthcare and medical education, we've typically been a bit behind the curve. And so it's actually adopting what is being used in other spheres. So what do you think the longer term effects of this are going to be?
So there's some of the things I think we're going to be able to take forward just because we've seen how useful they are. Remote access to teaching, that's beneficial for people not being geographically in the hospital at the right time, whether they're off-site or they're on a different shift pattern or whatever. It's also beneficial for people who are on parental leave. And that's something that I think maybe we as a medical community kind of just didn't really have put much thought into before the virus. We kind of just said, okay, you're on parental leave, see you when you get back. And actually, it doesn't have to be the case. Obviously, if you want to go on leave and you don't want to partake in the teaching, you don't have to. But many people I've talked to have said, yeah, actually, I would like to. And I didn't know that it was possible. And now it is. So we've got some sort of democratization of access to medical education. And I think that's something that we can take forward. I think the other thing that we've seen happening, and I'm going to take the liberty of speaking principally about radiology because I'm a radiology registrar, we've got access to medical education content from across different hospitals, different deaneries, and even the world. And again, there was no reason that couldn't happen before, but now it's happened. I see no reason, or there's no major reason why it can't continue to happen. And it's something that we have been trying to do clinically in radiology. There are sort of silos of subspecialist radiological knowledge that exist in certain hospitals or in certain locations. And it is already relatively common practice to kind of work across deaneries when you've got a particularly challenging imaging case. There's no reason why you can't do that with education as well. You can, if you've got a subspecialist person who's particularly good educator in a certain deanery, it makes sense to share it nationally because you save the time you benefit the learners because everyone can access this expert. You also save the time of local departments not having to duplicate the same amount of the same work again and again.
There is duplication. A lot of the organizations that have been grown since COVID are doing a lot of the same things. It isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that's what's happening. And you will find that people will recreate the wheel. I think it's a great idea in principle, and I agree that there will be, in principle, it would be lovely if everyone would work together and communicate better because of this. But I think just that idea that we'll all change our behaviors is challenging to me. We've got a lot of the groups as well that have been set up are actually businesses as well, so they will compete rather than necessarily work together.
I think what you were saying, Andrew, is really interesting. So we've heard earlier in the conference about how technology can actually cause some barriers, but also we're hearing how it can be breaking down lots of barriers that already exist as well. From Slack, I think there's a question about the technology. So what advice do you have for people if they've got an idea or want to innovate, but they don't have the technology know-how?
I can give an example. Or Ryan, do you want to go ahead?
I would just ask around. So as was already mentioned, we have the capacity to we've had the capacity to hold this conference for the past decade. The only limit has really been what we've been able to imagine doing with the available technology. So take, for example, a phone isn't really a phone anymore. It's really a canvas for, if you have an idea, you can code for it and you can put it onto a tablet or a computer or a smartphone and try something out. So so long as you've identified a need, then there shouldn't really be a barrier with that middle step of coding, of programming. This pandemic has shown that there is a real collaborative spirit, and you will be able to find someone who is able to work with you with the know-how and to bring your and other people's vision into reality.
Junaid, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think absolutely what I reiterate what Ryan said. To get something made, you need a group of people to do it. So if you've got an idea, then you need to, and you're passionate about it, then you can find people who you can bring along with you to get that done. So if you're not tech savvy, I would not say I'm particularly tech savvy, but there are people out there who can do it, and it's just about finding those people. Now, things like this conference, for example, and setting up links with people in this area will open up doors to other people who can then kind of realize those things that you want to get done. Yeah, so that's the way I would go about it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely key surrounding yourself with kind of people who think differently and have different skill sets, because that is how you will get the best solution. And nobody is an expert in everything. And the other thing that I've been amazed by is how many platforms or apps are out there who aren't designed for engineers. They're actually quite accessible. And so you can get quite far without coding yourself. So the other question I had was, what areas within medical education do you think are in need of innovation?
I think that medical education scholarship needs to evolve, because I think as innovation develops, I mean, all the stuff that we're talking about today, it's happened so fast. And I talked earlier in my talk about this evidence practice divide. So basically, all of these resources are being developed really quickly, and we don't have time as scholars or researchers to write things, to make the innovation, to evaluate it, to write it up, and then get it published. Because by the time we do that, there's another innovation happens. So I think medical education scholarship needs to evolve and adapt to act a lot more rapidly. It's a bit of a left field way to look at it. It might not necessarily answer the question, but I think it's really important.
I think one of the things that I think was mentioned actually previously early on by Pedra, we've got a deluge of content, like content providers doing the same or similar kinds of things for slightly different audiences, or indeed for the same audience. And I think one of the sort of, it's not necessarily a fancy innovation, but one of the sort of things that I think should and probably will come out in the near future is some sort of website or universal platform that kind of curates things such that you've got a resource that you can go to. Because certainly when I find for me as a radiology registrar, you know, every few days there's a new conference that's released its archive of educational material online. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to plow through this, and then there's another one, and I'm like, okay, well, I need to start through it. And you kind of, you end up sort of starting a lot and maybe not finishing so many things. And that's not necessarily, I mean, the situation's evolving rapidly, so I'm not saying people shouldn't keep releasing content for free, we as learners are certainly beneficial, certainly enjoy that, but it's just sort of trying to work out where the value is and sort of making it manageable.
I think one of the big things that will come through in the next kind of 5 to 10 years will be use of AI. So artificial intelligence can look at algorithms and look at individuals and see actually what is their best learning style, and will then be able to direct you to learning resources that could then tell you, this is what we think you would benefit most from. Because as you said, Andrew, there is a huge plethora of content out there, and it would take multiple lifetimes to go through all that content to work out which one you think is best. So a way of trying to sift that out at the moment, we do that normally by speaking to colleagues who we think have the same learning styles and learning ways we learn as each other, but we don't know that for sure. So I think one of the big things that will come out in the next kind of 5 to 10 years would be kind of utilizing AI algorithms to try and help learners best utilize resources that are out there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been a key theme for the conference about this, how overwhelming it is, and that need to triage. And I think we tend to go towards this kind of didactic learning because that's much easier to deliver, and you don't have to think so much about it. But, you know, we heard earlier about cognitive load and how easy it is just to get overloaded. And you need to have that variety to really mimic the kind of in-person learning experience. Ryan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so one thing that I think needs to change with medical education is sometimes there can be a divide between student and faculty. So students will come up with a new innovation, and I think that a lot can be done if students and faculty have a more collaborative approach. It works quite well for peer-to-peer education, quality control, stuff like that. And so the pandemic has shown that students working together can get a lot done. So we've seen national support networks for NHS staff established by students, and faculty sometimes trailing behind to support, but they have been quite supportive, and I'd like to see that continue. So having faculty be more collaborative with students.
I agree, and I think actually a lot of what has come out of this situation is leadership skills and all of the team working and things like that, and students have had opportunities that they perhaps wouldn't have had otherwise. We've heard a lot, this comes from the audience, we've heard a lot in the conference about some of the limits of technology, but actually once this is all over, where do you think technology is better than what we were offering before or what we could offer face to face?
Where is it better in terms of the teaching? So I think the fact that you can use polling, I think that's quite a good a built-in function, because you kind of get a feel for where the room is versus where you are, and I think that does exist in real life. If you've got those, if your university has that function built in, but if you're using Zoom, it's already part of Zoom. So that's certainly a way in which technology can sort of level up on what a real life experience could provide.
I also think it's attitudes as well. It's not just the tech that's improved, it's attitudes and acceptance of tech. I think generally historically there might have been some suspicion towards certain types of technology, and saying, oh no, why would you do that whenever you could do it in a face-to-face way. But actually a lot of our it's not really specific groups of people, but there's quite a lot of people who have been suspicious of tech before, and I think that a lot of that's faded away, and that hopefully should be really beneficial for tech in the long term.
I agree with both of those comments. I think the big thing for me is that a lot of the people who had no idea about any of this technology now know about it and are comfortable using it, and so it'll be used more. So I just think that, like you say, just opening that door will now allow this to be utilised far more. So it's just kind of getting people used to it and practicing to it. So I think in our institution, there's bewilderment when it first happened, and now it's almost accepted that this is the way that we will teach. So that paradigm shift has happened so quickly.
And these people also bring their perspectives, which are critical and different, which will help shape the technology in the future, which is great.
And I think that what we're seeing is a lot of the more kind of didactic teaching can be delivered online, and people can learn when they want to learn. I definitely have days at work where I think, God, I really am not in the mood for this. And then other times where there's nothing I want to do more than work. So actually giving students that flexibility and then going forward and making the most of face-to-face teaching and making it a bit more innovative, rather than just sitting in there passively in a lecture, would be really good going forward.
Yeah, it's not just the, as you pointed out, Emma, it's not just accessing the teaching that's flexible. It's also when you're in the content. If it's a recorded content, I personally find the fact that you can play the lecture at 1.5 or 2 times speed on certain platforms, I find that really useful. Being able to pause it, rewind it, that's really useful. I personally now, if I'm accessing recorded content, I default automatically to 2 times speed. And I did a little poll on Twitter a few days ago, and most people are watching it at 1.5 or 2, or sometimes and normal speeds. No one's watching it slower than real life, but you've got that added flexibility even once you're in the content itself, if it's recorded.
Sometimes when I'm speaking, people think they're on 2 times speed and they're not.
I think Andrew, you've just seen my Audible account where everything's at 2 times speed. I think that's right. You can revisit it, you can pause it, you can look up bits that weren't clear, you can make notes. It's just a lot more flexible. So I know that a lot of organisations have been concerned about how to get students to engage. And I think we've got this real culture of presenteeism, of, oh, you're here, so you're learning. And so how do we address that, and how do we engage with students better?
You could do it. You could make people attend or turn up because you've made the content good, and that would kind of be the main way to go around about it. And it's good in the sense that, obviously, good as in it's got lots of learning objectives in it, and it adheres to some sort of principles of educational theory. But also good, I think, means there's a good communication strategy around it. Like, it's advertised well. That's how people find content. You may not think that's particularly educationally sound, but that's how people find things. Also, making it aesthetically pleasing. That's, again, something that is superficial perhaps, but it is part of drawing people in and keeping their attention. And I think once you've made it good, you've then got to make it accessible, because if people want to access it, they should be able to access it easily. And I think one of the problems we've seen in the early phases of when we were transitioning during the period of the virus, there was so many platforms out there. Some of our teaching for radiology was delivered on one platform, Zoom, for example, in the morning, and then Teams in the afternoon, and Blue Jeans, and you're just thinking, hang on, why do I need to have all of these different things? And there's no cohesion there, and that's fine. It's good to have that competition, because ultimately, after a period of time, you then realize, okay, this is the platform that works best. You need to trial it, and you need to experiment as individuals and as a group to work it out. But once you've made it good and you've made it accessible, you should have many people, perhaps most people, attending. And if you don't have everyone attending, you could then make it compulsory. That's the sort of, in terms of like a percentage of the attendance is compulsory, and that's quite a kind of punitive way of looking at it. But I think also the benefit, and just to put a positive spin on it, the benefit of making it compulsory is that it gets those people who wouldn't otherwise not access it to access it, and then maybe they'd actually change their perspective. They think, actually, do you know what, this is actually something that is beneficial to me. Even if it isn't compulsory in the future, I'll continue using it.
Can I butt in and be a stereotypical academic and say that there is an answer to this in the evidence base? So there's I recommend, if you've not read about this, Salmon's 5-stage model for e-monitoring and e-learning, which basically suggests that for people to be able to successfully use online learning, there are steps you need to go through, which, as Andrew just hits the nail on the head, it's all about access and motivation. So it's a bit of a motivational theory. So this is all about inducting people properly. So if you get people inducted on a proper system, a system that they want to use, for example, on social media, there's no point in getting everyone to use Facebook if no one uses Facebook, because then you're gonna have to shift everyone onto Facebook. It's really difficult. You get them inducted and motivated to use that platform. They then move on through a process called online socialization, which is basically where they start chatting and forming relationships, because all this stuff is social. And that's how learning happens. At that point, there's information exchange, and then knowledge construction, and then development. So it all starts with good induction and connecting with your, with your learners, first of all.
Yeah, I agree completely with all those comments. The other thing that I'd add in is interactivity. I think people are a lot more invested in the learning material if it is interactive. The kind of didactic teaching that we used to have in medical schools of lecturers just talking to us, I think those days are gone now, and the content, especially online, allows that. So Andrew was alluding to polling, and I think that's so powerful, so useful, because it allows the learner and the teacher to kind of work out where to go. And And I think the interactivity element is really, really important. And technology allows that. It's brilliant. It allows us to do that. So I think we should use that and employ that as much as we can.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely all right. We just need to think of it as a whole experience. And traditionally, we've just thought as online learning as you put the thing up and it's the message that you're conveying that's important, rather than actually the whole experience and how people get to it and how they hear about it and everything like that is actually just really important. So I know there's also been concerns around kind of what is lost by this remote learning. And I think a big part of that is kind of pastoral support and potentially well-being, which is a critical part of learning and your educational experience. So what ways could we kind of address this need?
I think one of the profs from earlier on, Tim Lancaster, was saying that he misses the face-to-face interaction and seeing people, but you can replicate that with the video. You can turn on your video. And I think there's a certain reticence for people, at least in the sessions I've been involved in turning on the video. Even if they're asked to, they don't want to, which is totally fine. It's up to you if you're at home, or even if you're not at home, you don't want to turn on the video, you don't have to. But people who've sort of come around to turning on their video have said to me, actually, you know what, it's not scary at all. It's nothing untoward happens. And actually it is better, because then you can kind of use your cues and all those things that you would normally use in real life to kind of know when to come into a conversation. Is it okay to interrupt? You kind of get all that stuff back. So that's kind of something that, if in the context of pastoral support as well, if you use your video function, I think that maybe would make that conversation easier, especially for something like pastoral support, which is which is an inherently emotional conversation.
I think there'll be a move more towards. Sorry, Ryan, do you want to speak? Sorry.
It's incredibly important for it to be as visible as possible as well. So there are some pastoral support systems online which take 4 or 5 links to get to, when they should really be 1 or 2. They should be on the intranet front page or whatever, if it's Blackboard or whatever educational thing that people use to get their information or get notifications about work. Whatever, the same way that if you're walking down a corridor, an office should be visible, it shouldn't be in the corner. If your students or if your faculty are walking down this corridor of the internet, they should be able to slip into this pastoral care place and chat to someone. And again, with the video, that'll make it even better.
With social media, it's all about mentoring. So mentoring is a big part of pastoral care, and social media opens up this world of opportunity for mentoring. You can see that there are other people out there. If you're going through something difficult, and you see that other people are having the same difficulty, you can see that there are other people out there who are experiencing it, and you're not just alone. So that can be quite powerful, though admittedly it can be quite a lonely place as well.
I think one of the ways to counteract that is kind of group learning. I think kind of flipped classrooms and case-based learning, in which groups will basically work together and then present to other groups, is a really positive way of doing it. That was something that was happening, I think, up and down the country in a physical sense, and I think there's no reason why we can't carry that on in a virtual sense as well. So I think that's something that will be the next progression of the kind of online teaching, is to carry on the good work that was being carried on in terms of group work. So you keep on tabs with your peers, and you can keep in touch with them and keep that social kind of interaction and cohesiveness that we all thrive on.
Yeah.
And to keep on building that sense of community that was established over the past couple of months, because that's an incredibly important part of pastoral support, peers and having people around you.
So it's increasing the visibility of the pastoral care and increasing the community feel, and basically creating those opportunities to have to notice that someone's not quite right, which you can't do in this webinar function where unfortunately I can't see the audience, but making sure that there are those opportunities. There's been a request on Slack for some articles on technology and e-learning. So Johnny, you might have to post some on those later.
Yeah.
So I think we're now going towards the end of the panel discussion. So before we go, do you each want to give one takeaway message from the discussion, or what you would like to tell people watching?
I would just say don't be afraid to innovate. If you are, don't do it alone. There is help out there, and other people will no doubt want to be part of something. And yeah, it's honestly, just do it. It's the most fun thing in the world. The other thing I would say is that when you do create something, think critically about it, and think about how you can use the make it evidence-based, basically, is what I'm saying, because I think that's ultimately important if you want to contribute positively towards the community.
Brilliant. Junaid?
My take-home message is make it as interactive as you can. If you make it interactive, learners will enjoy it more, they become more invested in it, and you yourself, because it's really hard to give a teacher session online because you're getting nothing back compared to a normal classroom, whereas if you make it interactive, you get something from it, they get something from it, so just try and make it as interactive as you can.
Ryan?
Yeah, building on what Johnny said, if something annoys you, or if something doesn't seem like it could be the best thing that it could be, then you might have identified a need for something, and that's something, an idea that you can build upon, and yeah, be collaborative and be ambitious with what you can achieve.
Andrew?
So I know this is an innovation in technology forum, and I know that I've been asked to come here because I've got a website and I'm developing an app, and I love technology. I mean, here are two of my 3 phones. I don't know why I've got 3 phones, but it's well established I love technology. But what I'd say is that it's not always the answer, and for certain people that I've talked to, they have felt left out by the process. Sometimes things that are totally obvious to me, as someone who's relatively tech savvy, are not obvious to other people. I would say, as an example, there's a pretty humbling example of this. I'm developing this new app with a colleague of mine, made sort of a front to it and all the contents behind it, and showed it to various people, and some people accessed it totally fine, but I was sitting with some person who couldn't get past the homepage, and I realized that things that are intuitive to some people really aren't to other people, and we shouldn't we should try to involve those stakeholders actively. Sometimes there is a danger with getting feedback surveys from having run a Zoom conference, because you ask the people who've attended the Zoom conference, do you like Zoom? And they go, yes. But then what about all these people who didn't actually make it to the conference? So I've seen a lot of positive surveys about online content, and I'm just thinking, where are those people who couldn't make it or didn't make it to that platform? Having said that, I love technology, so don't stop using it.
And use puns as well, they always help.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Andrew. I was talking to somebody from one of the local hospitals, and the innovation that they're looking to bring in is the longitudinal integrated clerkship model, which has been around for a long time, but they've suddenly got this struggle for how do we deliver clinical placements whilst adhering to social distancing. It's impossible. Whereas, and the other benefits from it is you get improved empathy, and they understand systems more. So saying, okay, well, this is the impetus we need to drive this innovation, and it's not a tech solution. So there are other solutions out there. Unfortunately, I think that's the end of the panel discussion. So thank you everyone for giving us your time, and everyone who joined us. I know I found it very enjoyable and interesting, so thank you.
Thank you to everyone that made tonight's episode possible. Whenever our scholars are thinking about complex problems facing our health systems, we encourage them to think about how they make significant change in the world of healthcare. We are incredibly lucky to have some incredible scholars in the HLA. They use the HLA as a platform to take their ideas and bring them to fruition. If you are interested in the work of the HLA, why not join us at one of our future HLA events? Why not join one of our programs? Why not even become a HLA scholar? Thank you for joining us. My name is Johan Marlwaner, the Director of the HLA, and it's a good night from all of us.